Merzcast.
Oh yeah, I gotta start this one. Recording. Mic check. This is what's the name of this podcast? Does anybody know yet?
I don't think we know yet.
We have a name. Maybe we need to come up with a name. Oh, Steve, do you want to wear these too?
Does it make me look?
I think it'll just be more funny.
What if I can't hear you?
Other way around. There you go, and just
We
get
wanna
that.
make it obvious that it's not hooked up.
Hey, take that cord off the earmuff there. It's like a roof shot. Yes, we want to make it as obvious as possible. These microphones are all working. They are all turned on. This is 100% legit. Kevin, did you say you got it synced up already? All right, just in case.
That's good.
Mic check, mic check. All right, we're live. Everything's live. All right, well, here we go. Dr. Steve, welcome. It's great to meet you and to see you today. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
It's been my dream to come on your podcast, Dave. I can't believe it finally, after all these years of you doing this podcast. I finally made the cut.
That's really an honor. I mean, out of the tens of people we have listening, actually, Kevin, are we in the tens yet? Well, in the fives of people we have listening. I never dreamed that we'd have somebody like you among our audience. So
Before we start, by the way, can everybody hear me? Because I'm a little bit afraid that
mic
maybe
check,
my
mic
voices are
check.
getting picked up.
Doctor, can you make sure you're talking into the mic,
Looks
please?
like I've only got seven mics. How much is that enough?
Kevin, are we getting him up on those mics?
We don't have any more, sorry.
Okay, just speak loudly and make sure you're talking into the mic.
Okay.
Well, let's just jump right into it. Now, Doctor, you've caused a little bit of a stir. You made some comments recently about breathing. Now you are a musician. You play a wind instrument, a brass instrument, and I heard you say this, and it's been reported by others as well. When you speak about breathing, you don't always talk about breathing with the diaphragm. You talk about like taking a big breath, and it's not a big deal. Like if your shoulders go up, and this is not really widely accepted in academia, and some are even suggesting that maybe the brass industrial complex has something out to get you about this. Like what is going on? Do you even believe in the diaphragm? What's your position on this? Can you set the record straight for all of us?
I certainly can, Dave. Let me quote from my brass Sermon on the Mount. You have heard it said, breathe from the diaphragm, but I say to you, it's a physical impossibility. And the only reason that you have ever heard of this is because of a vast brass academic conspiracy to spread vicious lies and rumors about breathing.
Now, just to be clear, Doctor, because this is a pretty serious accusation you're making.
That's right.
Do you believe that the diaphragm doesn't actually do anything? Or what do you think about the diaphragm?
It does do something, but you can't control it. So when you breathe, your diaphragm moves, but you can't tense it up or make it work for you because it's an involuntary muscle that just starts moving when you breathe. So you don't really have to worry about it. But if you are worrying about it and trying to tense it up, you're fooling yourself. You're just tightening your abdominal muscles and actually making it a little bit harder to play.
So I don't want to misquote you. Are you suggesting that your diaphragm is responsible for breathing, but if you try to control your diaphragm, you're not actually controlling your diaphragm?
That's right. Like Yoda said, David, don't try, do.
Kevin, do you think, can you fact check us here? Can you find us a picture of a diaphragm? Like, I want to see, does this thing actually exist? What is going on with this? Let me know if you can come up with anything there. Now, Doctor, what would you say to, let's say, a trumpet teacher who wants to prevent his student from tensing up his neck or his shoulders? And so is that why they talk about the diaphragm? Because they want you thinking lower and not higher? Like, what's the deal? What's the whole point of that?
It's just some information that's been around for hundreds of years, David. Probably came out of some mystical medieval medicine book. But, you know, we've moved forward now. We're in modern era, and we actually know how muscles work, so we don't have to have superstition about breathing anymore. We can just just talk about what actually happens when you breathe.
Okay, so what exactly are you telling your students when you're telling them to breathe?
I'm just telling them to take a deep breath, basically, and the diaphragm will do the rest. And to your point about being tense, don't worry about your shoulders and your stomach. Just that's another little quote from my sermon on the breathing mountain. You have heard it said, don't let your shoulders and stomach move, but I say to you, let them go wherever they want to.
Dr. Steve, I'm sorry, that almost sounds too easy, too easy to be real. Like, how do I know you're not the one that has the conspiracy here about breathing?
Well, good point. You just have to try it and see. But it's as easy as breathing. You've been breathing all your life, and there's no reason to do anything too much differently now other than just to make sure you take a nice deep breath.
Do you think the push behind the diaphragmatic breathing is nefarious or just an honest ignorance about how our body works?
It probably started as an honest mistake back when we didn't know any better. Just like when we thought that cells were just little pieces of protoplasm that didn't have anything in them, and now we know they have millions of little parts that work together, and we thought that about the diaphragm, but now we know. We don't really need to spread any more superstition.
Well, maybe we should back up and tell people who you are. Now, why should we be listening to you? What's your background? How do you know all this stuff about breathing?
Well, I grew up in the Salvation Army, and I played in brass bands, and I was a horn player and a euphonium player. And then I joined the U.S. Army as a musician, and I was playing for a living. And I began to study with somebody in Atlanta, Georgia, a man named Mike Moore, who's the principal tuba player in the symphony there. And he had studied with Arnold Jacobs, who had looked into the science of breathing with medical personnel way back in the 1950s for the same reason, because he didn't really buy the old ways of talking about it. And so he talked to actual medical professionals, and he has written about it extensively. And Mike had studied with him, and I studied with Mike, and that's when I found out how to properly breathe and what was actually going on. And then that really helped my playing and led to me joining the U.S. Marine Band in 1987 and making kind of a career out of playing.
When you say the Marine Band, do you mean the Marine Band?
I guess that's right. The president's owned the one in Washington that works at the White House. There are other Marine bands, but there's only one, the United States Marine Band. I guess it's like the Ohio State. It's the Marine Band.
Oh, wow. That's quite a story. So this breathing understanding all the way back to Jacobs, you said kind of happened in the 50s and 60s. So for that whole period, these last, I can't do math live on TV, last 10 years or however long it's been since then, are you suggesting that it's just taking a long time for this information to filter out into the surrounding area, and it's difficult to hit against an old idea that's firmly entrenched?
That's right. Many less people believe the old stuff than they used to, but there's still some pockets of resistance, I must say, chiefly among singers. That
Singers?
is if you consider them musicians.
Steve, we can't talk about that.
I'll leave it to you
We don't
to
want to
decide
get dropped off of YouTube.
Yeah. So I think they believe it's a useful way to think about breathing, even if it's not factually correct, but it seems like that's a little bit of a slippery slope to me.
I've heard the term diaphragmatic breathing, which, is kind of down here in the abdominal region, and then thoracic breathing kind of in your central chest region, and then also clavicular breathing, like around the what is this called? The clavicle, the breastbone. No, this is the breastbone. That's sternum. I don't know. I just have a podcast, guys. I don't know what these things are called. But anyway, are you suggesting that when I do breathing up here, or breathing down here, or breathing way down here, it's all just a breath, and there's really no difference besides, like, in my mind?
That's basically right. First of all, there's no breathing below the level of your last rib, because that's where your lungs end. So anything that's below that.
Kevin, can we get a picture of like a skeleton or something up here? I don't even know what a rib looks like.
And a pointer, a laser pointer.
Oh, thanks. Okay. Right. Okay, so I've got my ribs. It even has the diaphragm. So a diaphragm is real after all, Dr.
It's a real
Steve.
muscle. It's a real
Okay.
muscle. It's just you can't control it.
For those of you just listening, I have a picture of a human anatomy, picture of a human anatomy. I don't know what the grammar is
This
for
is
that.
excellent podcasting, by the way, to be describing a picture on the air. I'm sure this is riveting.
That's right.
We just went from 10 to single-digit listeners now.
Look, Dr. Steve, I've been doing it this way for a long time. My listeners, they know what to expect from me. So let's just go with it. Now you're saying that okay, so I see the lungs are behind the rib cage.
That's why you have ribs.
Okay, doctor. So my ribs are behind, my lungs are behind the rib cage, and so my breathing is happening from behind my lung cage.
That's
My
right,
lung cage.
behind your rib
My rib cage. Oh boy. All right, great.
Don't worry, I'm able to interpret your questions as
Now-
if it were a foreign language.
So if somebody is breathing from their diaphragm or even their abdomens, and they're moving that part of their gut down there, there are no lungs down there. What is happening?
Well, what's happening is your lungs are filling up, and the diaphragm muscle is pushing down so that they can fill up, and it's pushing your internal organs, and that's making your abdomen expand because there's nowhere for them to go. And then when you let the air out, they come back to where they were.
Very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more? You were talking earlier about your upbringing. Now I'd like to hear all about your time in the President's Own Marine Band, and maybe you've got some crazy stories from that too. You know, a time that you saw, you know, a president pick his nose or something like that. but I'm also very curious about your upbringing in the Salvation Army as well. Do you care to elaborate on one of those topics?
Sure. I grew up in Salvation Army music programs. My parents are Salvation Army officers. And I grew up.
Well, sorry to interrupt, Doctor. Can you make sure you're speaking to the mic?
Sorry. What?
Yeah, just any of them.
Is this okay?
Now, when you say the Salvation Army, are you like? Did you live in the thrift store? Like, what was going on about that?
No, I never lived in a thrift store. I mean, I spent some time in thrift
Oh,
stores.
yeah?
Of course, yeah, because a lot of Salvation Army Corps have them. But I kind of grew up on the campus of the training college where they train officers.
Officers?
Yes, those are the pastors of the Salvation Army.
So it's not a branch of the military?
No, it's a movement, actually, and a denomination, and it uses a quasi-military organization.
Denomination like a
Like-
church denomination?
Like a church denomination, but a little bit different than that.
Like a cult, you mean?
Some people might say so, yeah. And so I grew up in that, and my dad was a musician, and also played a brass instrument, as did my mother. And so I naturally just kind of started playing in my little youth band in my church. And then I joined the senior band, and then just went to camps and did all the stuff that Salvation Army musicians do. Actually, I did less of it than they do now because they didn't have conservatories and that kind of thing back in my day. But that was essentially my preparation for a playing career.
Wow. So growing up in the Salvation Army was what led you to being in the Marine Band. Now you play, what's the baby tuba, right?
Yeah, it's called a euphonium.
Euphonium?
Euphonium.
Euphonium.
It's Greek for a beautiful sound.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So the euphonium in the President's Own Marine Band, and you did that for how long?
Almost 25 years.
Now you're a doctor, right? A medical doctor, or what kind?
I'm a doctor of trombone, so if you have a sick trombone, you can bring it to me, and I can.
Oh, that's interesting.
Perhaps
I assume since you were talking about the lungs and breathing, you had some background in, like a physician or something.
No, but I did study that part of it.
Okay.
As I was saying before.
Now, wait, hold on. Sorry to keep interrupting. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. You played what's it called again? Sorry.
Euphonium.
Euphonium in the President's Own Brass Band, renowned as one of the President's Own Band, not the brass band, called one of the best bands in the entire planet, probably. But you studied trombone?
I did.
What's that all about?
Well, because I already had a euphonium job, so when I was going to school, I figured, and I'd played trombone as well almost the whole time that I'd played euphonium, so that I could play in groups that use trombones and not euphoniums, like jazz bands and orchestras and brass quintets and all that. So I figured I would study the trombone just to do something a little different.
Very interesting. Hey, Kevin, do you think you can find us a little bit of information about the trombone, maybe, or about the euphonium? And yeah, thanks, man. Now going back, let's jump back a little bit. When you were talking about the thrift store, not the thrift store, the Salvation Army. Now the church part of this, or denomination, or whatever you call it, the movement. What can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I think our listeners are probably going to be curious about kind of how that factors into all this. Now, I mean, they have brass bands randomly, pastors. What are they? What do they believe? What do they think? Why have you decided to hitch a ride with them in your life? What's this all about?
Well, they're part of the Universal Church, but they are a movement as opposed to a standard denomination, and they had kind of a radical idea in the beginning, and that was to bring the church to the people, specifically poor people, and this was in the East End of London in the 1865 era. That's sort of like Charles Dickens' Victorian England.
Is he the one that wrote the Christmas Carol?
He did.
The Muppet Christmas Carol
Yeah.
is the best version.
Yeah.
Nobody can prove me
I don't
otherwise.
think he had the Muppets in mind, but yeah, that's the right story. And so, yeah, that was a pretty radical thing to do back then, and
Bring the church to the people,
bring the church to the
meaning
people. A lot of outdoor meetings, a lot of, eventually they realized that they had to help the people physically before they could help them spiritually, so they did soup kitchens and all kinds of charitable work, and eventually they started renting halls and having indoor meetings, kind of like other churches had, but the outdoor street ministry culture just came inside, so that's why uniforms and flags and bass drums and bands and tambourines and all that stuff that was designed to get attention outside came in the building, and that's what makes Salvation Army worship look a little bit different than say your standard church on a Sunday morning back then and now.
Wow, that's
the
pretty
basic
interesting.
idea. Of course, it went all over the world, and this huge charitable work and a tremendous number of churches. I don't even know what it is around the world, but I know we're in 130 plus countries, thousands and thousands of officers and hundreds of thousands of soldiers like me, and a whole lot of musicians as well, brass banding all over the world in the same way.
Wow. Okay, so now what everyone's been dying to know, have you ever been to the White House?
I have been to the White House several hundred times.
Several hundred times?
Several hundred, yes.
For those of you just listening, he said he's been to the White House several hundred times.
Yes, it used to be part of my job. That's what the Marine Band does. That's their primary mission, is to serve the President of the United States in the White House. So we would go over there a lot, obviously, because that's where he lives, and we also would travel with him or to the same place as he was in on many occasions. But yeah, I don't know what the total number was, but it was certainly in the hundreds.
My oh my. Now you retired. You're retired from the Marine Band, right? When did you retire?
2004.
2004. So I'm sure a lot of security procedures have changed since then. But what was it like getting into the White House back then?
Well, you have to have a clearance. So when you join the Marine Band, they do a little investigation on you and determine if you can get a White House clearance. If you can't be in the Marine Band. And then when you go over there, of course, your bus comes to a gate and some dogs sniff, and they have all kinds of stuff they do there. And then you get off the bus and you go to another gate, and they go through a metal detector, and you often put your horn on the ground, and they bring dogs out.
Oh, wow.
Check them out, and then maybe they have you blow a note through your horn.
Just to make sure you actually play the instrument?
And then you can go wherever it is you need to go in the White House, which of course is still well guarded, even with all those things that they do. They still don't quite trust you.
For any federal agents listening, this is purely educational. There's no hidden motives here.
No, it's a hard place to get in.
Wow.
Got harder and harder, obviously, after something like 9/11. I'm told in years past, say before President Kennedy was killed, that it was much looser over there, easier to get in, for the band at least. I don't know about the public. So, yeah, it's locked up pretty tight, and you get there pretty early, a couple hours before the event.
How early are we talking?
Say again?
How early are we talking?
It could be very early. For instance, the day after the inauguration of a new president, the band goes over and plays a little wake-up serenade at about, I think we probably start playing around 8, which means we probably got to the White House about 6, which means we probably left Marine Barracks about 5 or something.
Nice.
Like that. Yeah.
Wow. So do you get to meet the presidents while you're there, or are you kind of just doing your own little thing, tooting your horn in the corner while they're mingling?
In general, you don't, but then, randomly you do. So, like, there were a few times where we're standing around waiting a couple hours before an event. For instance, President Clinton used to run this little track that they put in around the south wall of the White House. So sometimes he would be doing his jog because he wasn't even dressed for the day yet.
Wow.
And he, by the way, was a all-state tenor sax player.
Oh yeah, I heard that.
So he would come over and we would chat with him. He was very curious about the band, kind of appreciated what we did. And then there's some other times for some indoor events, it's a little bit hard to explain, where the band was going to make a grand entrance, but the president would enter just before us, where I would be in the same little small security tent for 10 minutes. So I chatted with both of the Bushes fairly extensively, because the Euphoniums would often lead those little indoor marching.
Euphoniums are such divas, aren't
for
they?
whatever reason. So we were up front, and so I remember chatting with George Bush, the father, a good long while. They're very people-oriented people that are elected president, obviously, are outgoing, extroverted.
Did you ever offer any policy advice or anything like that?
No, never did that. Just ask them how the family's doing, how they're getting along. Usually they're more curious about what we're doing. They don't want to talk about their stuff all the time.
Right.
So.
Wow, that's incredible. Man, getting up at 5 a.m., but to be able to interact with the president or something, that's a pretty incredible story. So you did that for what, 20-something years?
Well, I was in the U.S. Army for 7 years, and then I spent about 17 and a half in the Marine Band, so it was close to about 24 and a half, something like that. Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. Now, Steve, we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure that I give you a chance to share if there's anything else. Like, you didn't share any crazy stories about your time in the band yet. Maybe you have something, but maybe it's not appropriate for air, so we can do that after we turn off the cameras. But is there anything else that people should know about you, or anything that you want them to hear? Whether it's something important to you or something interesting, share with our audience.
Oh, wow. Well, I do have a family. I have 3 kids and 9 grandchildren, so I don't really have any hobbies to speak of other than my work and those folks, because I have 9 grandchildren from 2 to 11. They take up a lot of my time, which is awesome, which I love. So, yeah, that's really it. And, you know, I think music is a great vocation. It's a great avocation. It's a great ministry. And if you're already a Sally, you should look into, we have a great system to help you develop as a
Sally
musician.
meaning?
Salvationist.
Oh,
Yeah.
Salvationist, Salvation Army people.
If you're already,
Yeah.
if you're a Sally, it's, as we say, that's a little, yeah. And if you're not, if you're a musician and you want to use your talents to worship the Lord and to spread the gospel, well, this is the place to do it. And if you're a brass player and you're a Christian, you're 90% Salvationist already. You might as well just come on over and join on up, because we can use you like nobody else can.
All right, well, you heard the man. This has been Dr. Steve Kellner. Thanks for joining us. It was a pleasure to meet you. Maybe we'll have you back another time.
All right, thanks, Dave.
All right, that's a wrap. Well, let's see if any of this turns out okay.
Cut it down to 1 minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Fine.
I'm hoping we'll get like a couple little clips out of
that's
it. You
all
know,
right.
we'll put them up, something like that. Thanks, Steve. And if it's all terrible, we'll just
We'll do it
scrap it
again.
all and do it again.